there, Carl.
Greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you this week?
I'm good. Yeah, things are good. Wishing for more snow, but other than that, things are good.
Yeah,
It's too
well, yeah.
sunny and nice around here.
This week things people in Utah say.
Exactly.
We have opposite problems here in DC. Like, oh no, it snowed an inch. We have to shut everything down. We're not very good here at snow.
Yeah.
So, Carl, I wanted to chat this week as I guess like a little bit of an extension of our last episode. We were talking about like this whole, what do you call yourself? I'm a financial advisor. I'm a like insert super witty elevator speech here thing. Just saying like, screw it, I don't care. I'm a blogger and letting people figure it out for themselves. But I thought it'd be interesting this week to take kind of the opposite end of this, which is, I know there are some advisors out there that are really like trying to build sort of their notoriety, their visibility, their personal brand. They're trying to get known in the media, right? Yeah, I don't want to have to introduce myself because I want everybody to already recognize who I am because I'm on the TV or radio or in the local paper or in the national paper or whatever it is, right? For some of us, we try to create this more inbound looking thing of sort of building our brands and visibility and doing media and PR. And so I thought it would be an interesting discussion since you've sort of directly lived that as like Sharpie guy in New York Times column and all the stuff that you've done in the space of media and PR. Just like, does it work? Does it actually bring in clients? How do you do it? Like, what do you actually do that turns that into business? How does all that work?
Yeah, really cool question, just because there's so much to unpack in terms of the Instagram-y piece of it. Like, it's the thing that everybody thinks you should do versus like what's the actual reality and how does it really work? And where my head goes first, and I'd be curious about your perspective on this too, is just like, what's the goal? Like why do it? Because that would drive. If the goal is I want to become Twitter famous, that's a thing. But if the goal is I want to get new clients, that's a separate thing. And sometimes we confuse those two. It sounds ridiculous to even say out loud, but it's really easy to slip down that slope a little bit, like, and lose track of what and why you were doing it. Because we can certainly get into it. I think it'd be fun to get into like, okay, let's decide that PR, something like writing for your local newspaper or a trade magazine for your niche, or let's decide, we can talk about later if that's important. And that I think is a good idea. We can talk about how, but first let's get clear. Have you sort of noticed that like sometimes we get confused, like PR with the goal or like I use like Twitter's the easy one to pick on. Like I use Twitter because it's about business. Turns out it's just about talking with your friends. Like, have you seen that problem?
Oh, I've definitely seen that problem. When we ran our research study on advisor marketing, like just literally getting out to advisors, like, what are you doing? How much time did you spend? How much money did you spend? How many clients did you get? And like, let's just math it. What's actually working? Social media was at nearly the bottom of the list
of things that work. Where was it in terms of time spent?
Well, so very high in terms of time spent and very low in terms of clients. So, we calculated like, what's the value of your time? Couple $100 an hour. How many hours did you spend? Okay, so that's like a multi-$1,000 marketing expense. All right, how many clients did you get for that multi-$1,000 marketing expense? And it's like, yeah, I spent like $10,000, $20,000 worth of my time, right? 50, 100 hours at a couple $100 an hour. And like, I got a client, maybe. It's like, cool. So, $10,000, $20,000 worth of your time and you got a client. That's not actually a terribly good ROI. There was a very small subset of advisors who actually got a lot of business off of social media. Like there's and sort of like the big head, long tail effect. There were
the Josh Brown effect.
Yeah. So there were some people that were at sort of Josh Brown style level. Almost everybody else got virtually nothing from it. And just, having lived some of the social media realm as well, like I know what happens. What happens is social media platforms have a bunch of metrics that they give you to, quote, tell you if you're doing well. number of followers, number of retweets, number of likes, number of impressions, like how many people saw the witty thing you said. Like, none of those are metrics that matter. Well, so if you want to be Twitter famous, those are metrics that matter. If your goal is to actually get clients, none of those are metrics that matter. The only metric that matters is, did you get a client?
Yeah.
And if you start paying attention to the wrong metrics, you spend your time on the wrong things, or you do it the wrong way. Because if you really want to get down to it, like, how do you get Twitter famous? Say super witty things that a bajillion people retweet. How do you actually get clients? Say something that's super useful for like 5 people on Twitter who have that very high stakes problem, and then watch them connect with you and potentially do business with you. So unless you're, so the more focused you are in the solutions that you bring to the table, if you're focused in who you help, you're probably not going to generate a giant audience. So if your primary metric is audience, you're going to end up spending your time focusing on the wrong things.
Right. No, and the reason I think that's such a valuable discussion is it applies to this idea of PR. And let's break PR down a bit. I'm not talking about press releases, which is what PR stands for. So it doesn't
Public relations.
Public relations or press release, right? So
you're going to get hate mail from someone in the PR industry.
Please forgive me. I
Carl,
know that
I apologize on
for
Carl's behalf to all of our PR friends. You do more than press releases.
PR stands for public relations, but I'm not talking about the type of public relations that is, because I've been through this a bunch with the book releases. Some people think that public relations equals press release, right? Like that's the end of the job. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the idea. I think what would be interesting for us to talk about is, how do I get media coverage? And even more importantly, maybe would be, how do I get quoted in media, and or how do I start writing a regular piece for some place? And then we can define that later. Go ahead.
Well, again, just getting to the like, what are your goals? I think that's actually really important to come back to in the context, even when you start talking about things like PR and media coverage, because at a high level, I would say there's probably 2 primary like strategies, ways that people turn media coverage into actual business and clients.
Right.
The first is, I get seen by prospects who want to do business with me. So sort of like the direct draw. And the second is what's at least known in sort of the marketing world as social proof. Yeah. Like, I've been seen in a high profile media place.
Yep.
The implication being like, they vet their guests, they picked me, I must be pretty good.
Yep.
Therefore, I've been endowed with the social proof because I've been seen on CNBC or quoted in the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, like whatever the thing is. I've been validated by the media. And the reason I highlight those is what it takes to be successful with each is radically different. If at the end of the day, what you're trying to generate for media value is some effective social proof, like as seen in the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and MarketWatch, once in my life, I have to get onto those platforms.
Yep.
Like at some point, I have to do some media thing that gets me some quote. And once I'm ever there once, I get to write on my website as seen on MarketWatch or Wall Street Journal or CNBC. And if I can get each of those once, I can put all 3 of them up there. But that's it. Like all I have to do is get there once. And once you get there once, the value is not being on the platform. Like no one's going to see you once on MarketWatch where you got like your 2 sentences of glory and say like, oh my God, those 2 sentences in the middle of that article was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. Would you please take my multi-million-dollar life savings? Like it does not ever work that way. I promise. Right. I've been in a lot of media coverage. It never works that way. So if what you're trying to do at the end of the day is like, I want the credibility, or maybe I don't know how to get ongoing continuous media coverage, but like I've gotten out there a few times. What you make of your media coverage is what you do with your social proof, not the idea that someone's going to read your quote and market watch and want to call you and hand over your life savings. So it's cool. You got quoted in the media. Did you put it on your website? Have you printed the article and put it in your approach package? So, tucked in there on the right side of the little twofold thing, you've got like your article where you were quoted, like, let's acknowledge, like, I'm someone who got recognized by the Wall Street Journal or Market Watch, or whatever the thing was. Did you send the article out to all of your clients and say like, hey, cool news. We got, our expertise was highlighted on Market Watch last week. Cause if I'm your client, like, I want to feel good about my decision. I feel good about my decision when my advisor tells me they were on Market Watch. It might even be an excuse for me to forward it to my brother-in-law and say like, yeah, my advisor is on Market Watch. Like, he really is pretty good. You should probably give him a call. Mm-hmm. So am I sending out to my prospects to let them know that I was quoted? Am I sending it out to my COI relationships to let them know, like, yes, there could be a piece of this that's basically a little bragging or a little humble bragging. Like, that's part of how marketing works. Like, there actually is a piece of marketing that from time to time, you do actually have to tell people, I'm good at what I do.
Right.
And for some of us, it's hard to say, like, either we're not there on the confidence yet and we're working on it, or just, we don't necessarily like to talk about ourselves or brag about ourselves. Sometimes we're taught certain childhood lessons about not doing that. But at some point, if you want to be successful from a marketing end, like, you have to actually tell other people you're good at this and show them a little bit of social proof. Yeah. But the key to me from the marketing end is if what you're trying to do is that strategy, like, you just literally have to ever get out there once, or alternatively, if like you've gotten out there once or twice, but you can't figure out how to turn to a regular thing, it's like, kudos, like, you got your 15 seconds of glory, but like, you're having trouble repeating it. It's cool. You don't need to take what you got, put it in your marketing packet, put it on your website, get it out there to get the social proof value. And you're injecting the value without needing to keep chasing every single reporter that might call with a, hero request.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really important. Like, that's sort of almost a 7-minute masterclass on how to use that. It's not the thing that's important. It's what you do with the thing. And we just call that, it's got a term, it's called social proof. And one way to think about the problem of like bragging and telling people, and how do I distribute the social proof? You get a reprint of an article that you were featured in. How do I send that out? I love to think about it as like, what problem does this article solve? So it's not like, hey, I was recently featured. Like, I would just like, it'd be much easier to phrase this in an email with a link, or in the mail you're going to send out, to say like, hey, recently the Wall Street Journal was exploring this challenge that entrepreneurs face that have had a successful exit, and they called me and I thought you'd enjoy the article, right? So it's not like, look, I'm featured. It's, here's the problem. And of course, when they open the article, you've highlighted where you are, or you put an arrow there, like whatever. But the point is, it's much easier to help people understand. The reason I'm sending this to you is because it deals with a problem that I thought you might find interesting. So that's important to note. And it is really true. Like, I can't believe the number of like disappointments where I thought my life was about to change because I was on the XYZ show, right? Like, these are big name places. And then I go do the thing and nothing happens. And it turns out it's what you do with the thing.
So all right. So now I just got to ask, like, what was the biggest heartbreak of, like, what's the highest profile thing you got to do that you thought was going to be a thing and then turned to be nothing?
So a national, without going into the name, one of the national morning TV shows.
Okay.
And like my PR, so when the first book came out, they hired, like, which is unusual, not just the internal PR team at the publisher, they actually hired an external PR team as well. And, it was so interesting to me because, anyway, that's a whole nother subject, but they worked really hard to get me on some TV show in New York. And I was like, nothing, it didn't do anything for book sales. There's a few people who do. Tim Ferriss, right? Like, if you get on Tim Ferriss, you're going to sell some books. And if you get on Oprah, you're going to sell some books.
I would say, as far as I hear, Oprah still works.
Yeah. Oprah, Tim Ferriss. And then there's a whole bunch of the podcasts that are just like, great Rich Roll. Like there's some people who have some real audiences that go out and buy books, but the traditional media stuff. So that was disappointing. I was on a TV show in Canada, and like I walk in, they rush you in. It's like one of those morning financial pornography shows. The what do they call them? The host she's sitting there. She's all ready. And I sit down, and the thing starts in 5 seconds. She's got the book in front of her. And this was near the end of the PR tour. And I was kind of salty at this point. And I was like sort of over the whole thing. And she literally was like, okay, we're ready. 3, 2, 1, start. Like we had no pre-talk, nothing. I knew nothing about the show. And she has the book in front of me, and she's Carl Richards, author of Behavior Gap. And she goes, Carl, what do you think of the market? And I was like, I literally said, that's actually a really dumb question. And I'm going to walk you through why. And when we got done, she goes, great interview, stood up and walked away. I was never going to get invited back. So anyway, that's a PR story for you. So let's talk. Let's
talk about the other end, because like there are two versions of this that I find that at least can work. The first is like, I'm doing it for the social proof, in which case the biggest things there are don't overdo it. Like if you're going to say you got quoted in the Market Watch and put it on your website, like you don't put it 8 times if you've been on 8 times. You really only have to be there once to say as featured in Market Watch and move on. So what matters at that point is what you do with the media appearance.
Yeah.
Not adding more of them.
For sure.
Now at the other end of this,
don't lose your spot. Let's also just make a rule. I think it goes without saying with this group, like we're going to be honest in the way we portray that stuff. Like there's a lot of people who think that, I don't know, like somebody mentioned your first name, Joe, and because it was there, you get to say that, or you see this with bestseller lists all the time. Like it was the left-handed author that wrote a book about gymnastics bestseller list, and you put international bestseller on your website. Like I only say that because like in sports, I'm at the point now where like my age category plus the thing, like I can finally be like, I was on the podium among the right-footed 50-year-olds that have no hair. Like we've got to be honest about the way we approach that. So that's the only caveat.
That's fair.
Keep going.
So the other end of this to me is like the other side that we've seen that works. And like we see this a lot in our marketing research as well, are the people that do a media thing with brutal consistency and repetition for a really long time, and it compounds really well. Yep. So the weekly column in the local paper. Yep. The local radio show. Some of those are bigger and go national, but most local markets are actually big enough that if you're going to get seen by tens or hundreds or thousands or a few million people every week for a couple of years, that market is more than big enough given how many clients most of us actually need to be very, very successful. So it's doing a thing over and over and over and over again. It kind of gets back to the old marketing saw, like people have to see your brand 7 to 9 times before they're interested. And if you're doing a local radio show or a local newspaper, guess what? Like not everybody tunes in every Saturday morning at the same time in the same place. So if you're going to get to 7 to 9 repetitions, like it might take 6, 12, 18 months before you're even getting there. But when you've been doing it for 7 years and people have seen you 10, 20, 30 times, you even get, people that start getting local celebrity status. Like, you're the one on the radio. I hear you all the time. Like, love your stuff. And then when they actually have a problem, like, oh, then now I'm retiring and I'm not sure what to do. And I've been listening to you forever. So I'm going to actually give you a call now. So it's about doing something that has that ongoing repetition and consistency for a long time. And that's part of why I highlighted this distinction, because if you're doing the social proof thing, like you really just need like 1 or 2 or 3 and you're done. Like milk the few you had. It's about how you leverage it, not continuing to be on the media. If you're going in the other direction, you want it to work. Like you're not doing it 3 times or 5 times or 10 times. You're going to do it 100 times before it starts to make a dent. Yep. And if you're not ready to do it at that level, you probably don't want to go down this road. So I'm curious from your end, Carl, because just you did a version of this on a pretty grand scale. Like you had a weekly column in the New York Times for a long, long time. So yeah. I'm wondering, did it play out? Did it translate that way for you?
Yeah, for sure. Let me address that, and then let's talk about how to do that, because I think how to get social proof and how to get the regular thing maybe start in the same place. And
Yeah, but you go totally differently because of what it takes to compound
let's get
sustain it.
really tactical about how to do that. We can even talk about some scripting, but yeah, look, the thing that I did with the New York Times for every week for 10 years, I can't even begin to quantify the value of that. And the value definitely was not what the New York Times paid me. Right? Like from the perspective of if what I was extracting as value was what they paid me, it was a total waste of time. But if you took the total value just in terms of and things that I couldn't even
meaning like clients, new business opportunities,
new business. And again, the clients, it was interesting. I still get an insane amount of, I've got X million dollars, I need help, I read something, can you help me? Still get a lot of that. It didn't seem to happen, but to your point, it didn't happen until later.
But what just takes a sheer amount of repetition to get there. 10 years of weekly, 500 columns later, multimillionaires start noticing.
But what was massively impactful from the beginning was what the social proof of that, and using it the way Michael outlined. So let's talk real quickly just about how to do it. So here's the reality of and a good PR person knows this, and it's what they've built their brand on. The reality of an editor. So let's just talk about an editor, and this could be the editor of the newsletter that goes out to dentists in Southern Nevada.
Okay.
This could be the editor of the local paper. It's true at every level. Editors and writers, and often they're both, right? Have what is referred to often as a copy hole, right? Like I've got to produce 2,500 words a week. It's this big hole I got to fill in every week.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard.
Yep.
Because it's like not only do I have to write the thing, I got to research the thing. I got to have new ideas. One of the hardest questions for them is literally like, what am I going to write about? So in my mind, that's a huge opportunity to be valuable. So if I were doing this, if I were doing this again, what I would do is I would make a list of the, and you may as well start thinking you're only doing this for social proof, because getting featured once is a requirement for doing it regularly. So
true. Just like how much of a commitment do you, to me, the biggest distinction is like, how much of a commitment do you want to bite off afterwards? Because what I find in essence, like you can do it once and it works because you social proof it. You can do it 50 to 100 times because eventually you build your local brand with repetition. And all the space in between that is like a giant valley of nothingness and results for additional work.
Totally. And they both start with the same step, which is getting featured once. So how do you do that? So I would make a list of, and I would be thinking from a social proof perspective, what are the brands, quote unquote, that I would love to have social proof from? Think of like the blue chip brands in your niche. And again, this most likely is local. Most likely. It doesn't have to be, but it could be the New York Times, it could be the Washington Post, it could be, whatever. It could also be your local paper. It could be, again, the monthly newsletter that goes out to the specific niche. So you figure out what are the brands that have the biggest impact on the business, and you just do a little research. Who's the editor? Who's the writer? Go start reading those. Okay. And then to me, Twitter is still the easiest way to do this, but you can also do this via email. Chances are their email address will be right there in their byline. It'll have the email address and maybe a Twitter handle. Start following those people. And here's what I would do. I would send a message to them through whatever channel. Okay. Twitter was magical in the old days, and I still think there's still some of this magic that you can get through to people. And I would just look for ways to add value. And the way I would do that, and you cannot promote yourself. They're getting 100 of these a day from people who are promoting themselves. You're not the only one thinking that it would be valuable. So what will set you apart quickly is if you just show up and you've actually been thoughtful. I get 100 PR pitches a day. 99.9 of them are totally thoughtless and they don't even get replied to because I delete. I reply to every thoughtful one, even if it's not applicable. And I say, this was so thoughtful. Thanks for taking the time. How do I know if they're thoughtful? If they reference my work. Hey, I know you write about this. I read this. I thought it'd be interesting to you. That's where I would start, is I would pretend like your job is to help them fill their copy hole and not with information from you. So you just say, Tara, I know you like to write about, financial issues among underserved communities. I read this great article in our local paper. Chances are you didn't see it because it's our local paper. And it really reminded me of this that you wrote. If you do that, here's a thing. It's in the area that you write about, and you make the extra step to say it reminded me of this with a specific thing to something they wrote about. If you just set aside, if this is a goal of yours, set aside an hour a week, make a list of those people, find a way to be valuable in their lives once a week.
So how do you get to the point of asking them to quote you though?
Yeah. So
because that's where I find for a lot of us they get hung. It's like, Tara, I really appreciated your article last week on the issues that retirees face. I'm a retirement expert and I'd love to be a source for your next story.
Yeah.
Like,
so
do I say it that way? Is there a better way to say it? Some people I find come in even harder. Like, I'm a retirement expert. And I actually saw some issues with what you saw, but I'd be happy to help work with you on the next one.
Yeah, I think here's the way, and I reserve the right to be wrong about this, but the way I would like to receive that email would be, hey, I love that article that you wrote. It's something I think a lot about. In fact, here's an article that I read that reminded me of yours, not your own. And then if you've done that, remember Seth Godin has this story where if you go to Grand Central Station and you say, and you got a $20 bill and you approach strangers and say, I've got a $20 bill, I'll trade it for a $5. If you try that in Grand Central Station with strangers, you're just going to get people like you're crazy and walk away. But if you show up to your neighbor's mailbox and leave a $20 bill, and you do that 7 weeks in a row, and then you go knock on the door and say, hey, I'm the guy, I've been leaving $20 bills in your mailbox, I'll trade you this $20 bill for a $5, they'll do the trade because there's a relationship. So I think through, and I don't know that there's a number, but I would just be adding value. And then when you're at that point, there's two ways to approach it. Like, I think, hey, I love this article. I thought it was great. I think a lot about this stuff too. It reminded me of something I wrote here. And I wouldn't say, do you want to quote me? But it's easy to say, if I can ever be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out. Like, easy to say that. And then I love what you just said. I think as a journalist, if somebody came and said, I love this article you wrote, but please forgive me or please excuse me, but I found a couple of things that might have been misses here. Can I, and just walk them through it. Thoughtful criticism, and Ron Lieber and I've talked about this a bunch. Thoughtful criticism is gold. Nobody does it. Nobody takes the time to be thoughtful, and let alone be thoughtful in a way that will make your work better. So that's how I would just make a small list. Like, this list should be like 3 to 10 would be a lot, but like 3 to 5 people. And I would just consistently show up. And the thing that's going to set you apart is consistently showing up as a thoughtful source. Because here's what that's a real good PR person. And we know some of them in our industry. A real good PR person, I can tell you what the writer and the editor will tell you about them. They'll say, oh, every time they email me, I know it's worth opening. Yep. Because it's going to be relevant and thoughtful about the work. It's going to help me fill my copy hole, is what they're saying. So if you can become that person, and then I would never say like, quote me, quote me, quote me. It's always like, can I be helpful? If you ever need a source, if you ever need any research, I know you got a lot on your plate. I think about this stuff all the time. If you run across something you need research on, just let me know. I'll hunt it down for you. That's how I would do it.
I will say the other angle around this, a version of what I had done in the early years as well. Because I'll admit, like I felt so uncomfortable trying to reach out and give like the thoughtful criticism approach. because
Yeah.
I like, I don't want to be seen as too critical, and then they don't like me because I want people to like me, like most human beings. Like I struggled with that. What I would try to do instead was here's a different angle. Like here's a different angle, maybe that that you haven't seen. So I don't know, like I love the article you did about people claiming Social Security too early and not delaying it as much as they should, even though they get all these annual increases. I do a lot of this work with clients as well, and one of the other things that we see is sometimes clients are just so anxious about all the discussion that Social Security is going broke that they just do it because they think they're taking the money and running. It actually doesn't even have to do with the math of the 8% increases. Just something that we see in our business doing this with clients. Thought that may be helpful if you're writing about this again in the future. And just literally like, here's a new thing, here's a new angle, because if it actually piques their interest and they decide to write a story about that in the future, like guess who they're calling? The person who literally gave them the idea.
That's beautiful. Like the new angle, even those exact words are perfect, because it's like, my language. I'm always looking for a new angle. So thankful, so grateful for you. You wrote this. It made me think of this, an angle that you may be interested in, like not even an angle that you may have missed. Like, I love that language. That's perfect.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan of like what you may have missed, but just like, hey, as someone that does this all the time, I see it a little bit differently. Here's a different angle for what we see when we sit across from our clients doing this.
Totally. It's so good. And so I think, to me, no matter what we do here, if you understand the impact, are you trying to be Twitter famous or not? What's the goal? Social proof versus doing the thing long haul. I like that framing a lot.
Yep.
And then the question of like, okay, how do I get either one of those things to happen? Turns out it's just some consistent hard work.
Yep.
Right. And we've given you language even around how to do it. And I wouldn't expect a response. Like, it'd surprise me if you got a response the first time. So you're like thinking, hey, I'm going to try this. There's a point at which, like, if you've tried it 10 to 12 times, you've been really thoughtful, really useful, and gotten no response,
you might have move on, or you might have a typo in the email address you've been sending it to.
Yeah. But other than that, I think it's showing up regularly, being helpful, realizing you're trying to solve a problem for them. You're not asking for anything in return. You're just asking to be helpful. You'll find that's I can't imagine anybody doing that consistently and being sad they did it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Carl.
Amazing. Super fun, Michael. Thank you.
Absolutely.